you. Thanks for tuning into the Waiting List podcast. I'm Long Long.
I'm Daniel.
And I'm Jacqueline. And we are three watch friends with a healthy obsession for watches.
So sit back and relax with us while we chat with collectors, industry giants, and share some good vibes. Welcome, guys, back to the pod, where it is our pleasure to have a particular Nicholas Manouso in with us today. Nicholas is probably best known as being the executive director of the Horological Society of New York. That is such a mouthful. If that wasn't enough to occupy his time, he's also a watchmaker, technical editor at Hodinkee, and a member of the Academy at the Grand Prix de l'Horlogerie de Genève. I hope I didn't miss anything out there, Nicholas, and welcome to the show. It's a real pleasure.
Well, thank you for having me. I appreciate it very much. I'm looking forward to talking about watches and horology and time and all that good stuff with you all.
Right. Nicholas, before we actually get onto watchmaking, your path into watchmaking wasn't exactly linear. So, in fact, it couldn't have been any further away from something as analog as watches. How did your professional career start?
Well, I grew up in California, specifically Silicon Valley. And when you grow up in Silicon Valley, most likely you're going to work in the tech industry. That's just kind of what happens. That's the biggest industry over there. And that's what I did. My father was working in the tech industry before I was, and he kind of encouraged me to go in that direction. So I had a career working in the valley, which is like the San Jose area, and then up in the city, which is San Francisco, working for various .coms and tech startups, writing code all day long, sitting at the computer, working on databases, building new websites. And it was a really intense career. I always kind of equate it and talk about the metaphors, like when you go to San Francisco, what's San Francisco famous for? It's famous for the gold rush, right? That's where the gold rush happened in, I think it was 1849. That's where the name the 49ers comes from, the football team.
Oh, okay.
So I kind of just say, a lot of times I'll explain and I'll say that San Francisco, it's still a gold rush mentality there. So you go there to strike it rich, but today you're striking it rich, hopefully, working in the tech industry. Hopefully your company gets bought, you have some stock options. That's kind of what happens today. So that's where my first career was. It was a good career, but it was something I knew I did not want to do for my entire life. And I eventually realized that, kind of came to that realization with the help of my wife. She kind of pushed me along, and eventually she encouraged me to follow my passion, to follow something that I was really interested in, and that's watches, mechanical watches, horology, and just to really dive into a career in watchmaking. So that's what I did.
I think your sentiments probably echo a lot of people who probably are in a job where they may not actually want to be in that. At least they have a question mark, but at least you knew. So I'd like to ask, that transition period, when did you know that it wasn't what you wanted to do, and how long had you already been in it? And then how did you then transition from just thinking about it to actually doing it? What was that process?
So I was working in the tech industry for probably 15 years. It was my first first job, out of high school, working part-time when I was in college. It's just kind of what everyone did. Maybe 10 years into it, I started to realize that this isn't really what I want to do forever. It just kind of manifested. I started to think about it, and then a big life event happened. My wife and I got married, and so it kind of, when you get married, you kind of start to think about, where have you been, where are you going? And I told my wife, I told her, I said, when I wake up in the morning, I'm not really looking forward to going to sit at a computer and write code all day. It's not something that I love to do. It's not something that I'm doing on the weekends. It's not something that I'm doing in the evenings. I'm doing it because it's a paycheck, and it's not necessarily what I always want to do. So she encouraged me, do what you always want to do, and that was watchmaking. So the next thing I knew, I was starting to research different watchmaking schools in the country, at least here in the US. And the one thing that was just kind of just surprised me right away was that the majority of watchmaking schools are totally free. It's because there's a general shortage of watchmakers. We need more watchmakers to service all the watches that are being bought today. They're free. So it was kind of like a light bulb going off. Like, wow, this is something that I could really do. I don't have to pay tuition. I don't need to take any student loans to do it. So I started applying to different schools. And next thing I knew, I found myself on a plane flying from San Francisco to Miami, Florida. And I interviewed at the school there in Miami. I met my future watchmaking instructor, and we really just clicked. We got along very well, and I knew that it was a good choice, and I wanted to study under his direction. And so we moved to Miami, and that's where it all started.
Where did you get the interest to go into watchmaking? It can't have just like, oh, I feel like doing watchmaking today. Let's go for it. Like, where did that interest start from, and how did you know it was what you wanted to do?
Well, I think I've always had an interest in engineering, and engineering, whether it's software engineering or mechanical engineering. Really, what is engineering? It's just thinking about difficult problems, taking them apart, figuring out how to solve those problems. And I enjoy that process. I enjoy the mechanical aspect of it much more. So I think I was always just aware of mechanical watches. I knew what they were. I wasn't a collector. I think every now and then I would buy a magazine. I would read Watchtime magazine, and it was just kind of fun. But when I started to research it more, and I found out that there's this entire industry, and it's not just in Switzerland, it's all over the world. I thought, wow, this is something that I could do here that is, it's different, it's a change of pace. Industry, which it really is. I just went for it after that, just dove in.
So what schools actually exist out there? Because I think they are linked with some of the biggest companies within the watch industry. What options are there available for people that want to go down this path? And how did you choose? Like, I want to go to this one rather than that one.
Well, if you want to go to a full-time watchmaking school right now, there are nine schools in the U.S. And I'm looking at the webpage that we have on the Horological Society website that lists all of them. Some of them, like you said, are affiliated with brands, and some of them are completely independent. So I can quickly run through them here. There's okay. the Gem City School in Illinois, the Lidditz Watch Technicum in Pennsylvania. That's the Rolex school. There's the Hayek School in Miami. That's the school I went to. That's also the Swatch Group School. There's the North American Institute of Swiss Watchmaking in Texas, the North Seattle College in Seattle, the Patek Philippe Horology program in New York, which is just a few blocks away from the Horological Society. There's the Texas Institute of Jewelry Technology in Paris, Texas, the Veterans Watchmaker Initiative in Delaware, and finally Yorktime Institute in Pennsylvania. So it's interesting that there's only 9 left. There used to be a lot of watchmaking schools in the U.S. because watchmaking was at one point a much bigger industry in the U.S. So that the number of schools has kind of dwindled as the industry has shrunk. So how did I figure out what school I wanted to go to? I went through a similar list, and I called them, I emailed them, talked with them, and I started going on interviews. So I guess it's different than if you were going to apply for a college or any other type of specialty school. That the watchmaking schools are so small. I had 5 classmates in my school. That was it. Oh. that you have to go for an in-person interview. It's not just writing an application and then you're accepted. And you're one of like thousands of people that are going to the school. It's going to be you and a few other people and the instructor. So you really need to make sure that everyone's going to get along. And you go for an interview, and you have an interview, a very basic mathematics test. You have a dexterity test to see, how you can use your hands. And then you have a bench test where you work on a watch at the bench, at the watchmaker's bench, and then just see if it seems like a good fit. So when I went to the Miami school, I just knew it was a good fit right away. I think it was mostly because of the personal connection I had with my instructor. That this was almost 12 years ago, and I still keep in touch with my instructor. He's a great friend. I am always asking his advice, and anytime he's in New York, I always catch up with him. He's amazing.
Would it be fair to say that the Rolex and the Patek school are completely oversubscribed? Are they like the popular schools to go for? Like, I don't know, like Harvard or MIT or Yale or something like that, or Oxford, Cambridge?
Yes, they are. Yeah, they absolutely are.
Did you try? Come on. Did you try?
I tried for Lidditz, for the Rolex school.
Yeah.
But I ended up, I just preferred my experience at the Swatch Group in Miami. And the thing about mechanical watches is, at least when you go to watchmaking school, you're not working on really fancy Rolex or Patek Philippe movements right away. Probably not for a while. So really all the fundamentals are very much the same. So it's, I guess, like if you go to Stanford or Columbia, or if you go to a community college and you take a basic calculus class, calculus is still the same, whether you're taught at a fancy, expensive school or not. It's kind of the same thing. But it's, I was very happy with the Swatch Group school. I didn't really feel a need to go to any of the other schools, but they're all excellent in their own right. They all have their own little specialties, things that they do that set them apart.
What about like after you graduate? So I don't know how long the course is, but if you go to like a Rolex or a Patek or a Swatch or a Richemont school, is it in like the contract that you then have to work for their brands for X amount of years? Because you just said it was free. So, well, nothing's free in life. So how is it actually free? And then, is there that agreement afterwards that you have to work for them?
So it's not a contract agreement. It's not like you're signing a contract saying you will work for them when you're done with school. It's more of a handshake agreement, or a recommendation, or kind of an open offer. The schools are free because these brands are subsidizing them, because they need watchmakers. That's really it. There's the independent watchmaking education system in the U.S. Is just not sufficient to supply the number of watchmakers that are needed for the industry to function here. And this is pretty much the case all around the world. So it's, that's, I guess that's kind of why they're free. The only thing that I paid for, just thinking back now, you have to pay for your tools. So the basic tools, you get a box when you first arrive, and you have your tweezers, your files, your loops, anything you can think of, your burnishing tools, everything is in that box. And I think I paid $3,000 for that box, and that was it. So after that, you just pay for your living expenses and your food, and that's it. Tuition's free.
Okay, so you graduate from watchmaking school. I'd like to ask, how are watchmakers trained these days? Because, I'm talking like, I know it's not the same industry, but dentists, right? Like you train and you have a very like broad range of skills. I wouldn't say you're like really good, because it's it's almost like a vocation. You actually need to do more to actually get good at it. Right. And then even then you get to specialize in, orthodontics or like root canal, this kind of stuff, implants, right?
Mm-hmm.
How has the course changed? Yeah, because I was reading a book by Kari, and it was saying that to make it really pretty blunt, it was saying once you come out of watchmaking school, you're kind of like not very good at all and not really anything. And it actually takes years and years and years to have a masterful approach on all the other aspects of watchmaking, whether it's case making, dial making, indices, all this kind of stuff, and finishing, obviously. So what kind of level are you at after you graduate? And what are the specializations you can go into?
Well, I agree with Kari, absolutely. When you graduate watchmaking school, you're not ready to work on very complicated high-end watches at all. That takes years and years of additional work, additional experience, and just learning. When the way that the watchmaking schools are set up right now, when you start, usually I can remember back, I think for the first 6 months, I did not touch a mechanical watch. The first 6 months are primarily just micromechanics work. So what's micromechanics? It's how to use a file, how to use a lathe, how to use a mill, how to how to burnish something, how to measure something properly, how to train your eye to be able to just look at a pivot and say, okay, that is 0.2 millimeters diameter or 0.3 millimeters diameter. So you're just building all of your fundamentals. And then once that's done, then you start to move into mechanical watches. I remember that was all my classmates. We were all kind of itching to get to finally work on a actual watch movement, but that wasn't for 6 months and from when we started. So when you graduate, you still have a lot of learning ahead of you, and really, that's what I love about watchmaking. It's what I love about horology, is that I'm always learning. You never are going to feel like you've learned it all. You're never going to get bored, because there's always something else to learn, and that's why it's just such a fascinating field of study. It's a fascinating thing to do as a career.
Well, when it comes to like learning more, is it very much after you graduate and you've got this diploma or whatever the certificate is? Is it good? Is it more like an apprenticeship style, where let's say I follow a Kari and I start working in, is the independent path a better way to learn rather than going to a conglomerate where I'm just putting a screw in or I'm just tightening this bridge on, or I'm just placing the rotor on and then it's going off to somebody else while they do something else, another screw?
Well, the independence path that you mentioned, I agree with you. It may be a better way to learn, because you're doing a little bit of everything all the time. You're always being exposed to new things. But think about the number of job opportunities for newly graduated watchmakers to work in the independent watchmaker's studio compared to the number of job opportunities to work at a big service center. It's probably like less than 1%. It just doesn't compare. So, and you're not going to get paid as well working for a small independent shop. So, when you are ready to leave watchmaking school and go into the industry, most of the time, it's kind of like working in the tech industry in Silicon Valley. You don't really need to look for a job. Jobs look for you. So you're going to start getting contacted by all of the big brands, all the big service centers saying, hey, would you consider coming in and visiting us, working with us? Would you like to come and have an interview, a bench test? And that happens very quickly. The other thing to consider, at least here in the US, there really are very few independent watchmakers that you can go work for. So, if you want to go work for Kari Voutilainen or any of these other fantastic independent watchmakers that are working, you're going to be traveling overseas. And you can do that, but it's not as easy as just getting a job at a big service center where there are plentiful jobs available.
So you're making this sound like it's very like you're hot stuff, basically, is what you're saying, you Nicholas. You're hot stuff. So you're in demand. So what is the, starting salary of a watchmaker, and how does it progress? Like, how rapidly does it progress if they're so in demand?
Yeah, well, this is a sore spot for me, because I like to always talk about watchmaking as a career. I like to promote it, tell people to get into it. But I know from my experience working in the software industry that the salaries don't really compare. I don't know the reason for that. There's not much I can do to influence that or control that. But a starting watchmaker, just out of school, you're going to be making around $50,000 salary per year, and that's not even half of what you would make as a starting software engineer. If you are living in the Bay Area and you studied computer science and you graduated, your starting salary day one is $125,000 to $150,000, and then it goes up from there. So watchmaker salaries are much lower. You can get up to six figures as a watchmaker. I'd like to see those salaries increase across the board, because I know the prices for watches are increasing across the board. So the money is there.
Going to shareholders. Not trickling down.
It really should, right? Watches are more in demand than ever. More watches are being sold, and if the big brands really want new watchmakers to join them, it makes sense, I think, to start to raise those salaries. Just thinking about inflation, this year in the U.S. we had almost 6% inflation year over year, and I'd like to see those salaries increase at least along with the level of inflation.
Right. I've just lost my thread there. What was I going to say? Oh, Jacqueline's got a question.
I have a question. So that was all very, very interesting to listen to. Thank you for sharing with us, Nicholas. I recently came back from a trip from Switzerland, and for the first time I was able to, visit workshops and see apprentices and watchmakers there filing away and, doing the finishing touches and whatnot. And I was just wondering if you could use it like an analogy to help me understand, like, what's the difference between, say, if I were a freshly graduated watchmaker from watchmaking school, what's the difference between me going to work in a repair shop, like a big like factory repair shop, from Rolex or all the other brands, or me applying to be a watchmaker at an independent brand? Like,
Okay.
are there hands-on experience type of differences, or are there requirement entry level like differences? I'm just trying to understand what would make someone who's neutral about the either decision choose either or.
Okay, so we can think about the advantages and disadvantages of either situation.
Mm-hmm.
The advantage of working for an independent watchmaker is you're going to be exposed to more of a diversity of problems, right? You're going to be more responsible for a wide range of activities in that workshop. So maybe you're going to be working on the movements. Maybe you're going to be fabricating a case. Maybe you're going to be making a dial. Maybe you're going to be servicing a movement, regulating a movement. Probably all of the above. You need to be able to do a little bit of everything, and that's because there are fewer people. It's a small workshop. And then we can think about working at a big service center. In a big service center, you're probably going to be specializing in one type of movement. So you're probably going to be just working on that one movement. Maybe you are doing the initial assembly of it, and that's what your focus is. Maybe your focus is more on the regulation of it, and that's what you do. Maybe you are more adept at case finishing. You're working on the cases, preparing those, and you're casing up the watches. And that's really what you're going to focus on for the majority of your time. So that's one difference. And then also thinking about a big service center, big brand, there's probably more job security there, right? You're probably going to have a higher salary, more benefits. You're going to have a little bit more of a secure future because the company will be around. And then at an independent shop, it's going to probably be the reverse, right? Because it's a small company. Who knows what the future is going to be, if they're going to be around. The reason why I'm thinking about this, talking about this, is it's exactly the same scenario working in Silicon Valley in the tech industry. If you're going to work for a big tech company like Apple, Google, Facebook, or versus a small tech startup, right?
Yeah.
It's the exact same trade-off. And I'm sure that probably happens in many other industries as well.
Yeah, I was just thinking like the same thing with IB or consulting. You can go into boutique firms that are a lot smaller and you might be more hands-on, but then the name isn't there. But then if you were to do an entry-level position at a big firm like JP or, GS, then you might have a lot more exit options because the reputation of the company, but you probably are specializing a certain set of skill sets, at least when you first enter. That's interesting. Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
I just want to go back a little bit because we've said that how much like you didn't want to do Silicon Valley tech industry. And now we spent a long time where you've told us about your watchmaking journey. Forgot to ask, how does it feel? Now I take it you're doing something you like you have a big contrast between how you felt before, right?
Well, it doesn't feel like work.
Right.
I wake up in the morning and I cannot wait to start getting into watches. And for me, that's a lot of different angles, right? I can be working on a watch movement. I can be working on preparing the plans for the next lecture at the Horological Society. I can be writing an article for Houdinki. I can't wait to do it. And sometimes I'm working all day, all night, and my wife will tell me, just relax. You don't need to keep working all night. Just relax and watch a movie or something. I'm thinking about watches 24/7. It's what I love to do. I'm very lucky in the sense that I make my living doing it. But it's something that I really want to try and promote because I know how happy it makes me, and I know how happy it makes all the other watchmakers and people in the watchmaking community. And I really want to promote it, let people know that watchmaking it's a viable career. It's something that you can really enjoy doing. It's a long-term stable career. And it's not something that is just done in Switzerland. There's the stereotype. If you ask someone who maybe knows a little bit about watches, but they're not a collector, they're not really into it, you ask them, what's a luxury mechanical watch, and they'll think it's a Swiss watch immediately. And that's a great answer, but there is more to watchmaking, more to horology than just Switzerland. Watchmakers are all over the world. Time is the common denominator. Time is what makes us all human. It doesn't matter how old you are, how young you are, where you live in the world. There's still 60 seconds in a minute, right? Maybe the minute seems like it's a little bit faster in New York than other places, but you still have 60 seconds in a minute.
Right. So let's continue with your development. You gave us all those options you can do after you graduate, but as far as I know, you didn't take up you didn't work in Swatch, did you? So what was your next path, and why did you make that move?
So my next path was after school. So my wife moved with me. She uprooted her life. We moved to Miami together, so I could go back to school. And then after I was done, she wanted to go back to school as well. So she was going to be going to school here in New York. So we both moved to New York. And when when we moved to New York, I didn't really think about it in terms of watchmaking, but I had this idea. I thought maybe in New York there's some old-fashioned club or some secret society of watchmakers that are sitting in a wood-paneled room in an old 1800s building in the middle of Manhattan talking about horology. And I was very surprised to find out that there actually was a group like that called the Horological Society of New York, and they've been doing that since 1866. And so just very fortunate to land here in New York and get so involved with the Horological Society. So after school, I did not work for the Swatch Group. We moved up here to New York. I started working independently just by myself. I started working with Hodinkee. In the very early days. It was, I think, 4 or 5 employees, just super early. Now I can't even keep track of how many employees are there. The company is growing a huge amount. It's amazing to see. So I got involved with Hodinkee. They got involved with the Horological Society, and the rest is history.
So just touching back on, well, it's just a random question, but you mentioned that, you can do watchmaking anywhere. But when you look at a lot of the Swiss companies, which are basically, I think they play a big part in the watch industry, right? A lot of people in those companies are not, well, they're all Swiss or they're all French. Like, is there a glass ceiling for people that are not Swiss? Like something that isn't really said? Because the only American guy I know that is, well, in Switzerland is Michael Friedman, right, at AP. Mm-hmm. And he really moved over to Switzerland and he learned French and all of that kind of stuff. But what about like everyone else? Is it like realistically a lot more difficult? Are there barriers that you have to overcome?
Well, first of all, I got to say, Michael Friedman is great. I don't know about his French. Last time I talked with him, we were joking, and he's been trying to learn French for a while. But I think both of us are equally as bad at French. Maybe he's got a bit of an edge on me these days. But Michael Friedman, he lived in New York. Great friend. I'm so happy for his success at AP. He's just now finishing his 5-year term as a trustee of the Horological Society. And he's just incredibly talented and so successful. Very happy for him. In terms of a glass ceiling, I don't know. I think what there is there's a difficulty in getting into the Swiss watchmaking industry because there's not really many places to start, at least here in the US, right? So if you want to get into, let's say you want to get into the tech industry, it helps if you have some entry-level experience, right? You say you worked here, you worked there. I guess you could say it for any industry. Say you want to get into the restaurant industry, you want to work at some very high-end restaurants. You need some initial experience, saying you worked at some small mom and pop restaurants, you worked your way up, you got this experience. But getting that experience is difficult when there's not much of an industry to begin with where you're living. And so that's the challenge that we have here in the US. Once we had a massive watchmaking industry in the US. It was the biggest in the world. It's not something that we think about much anymore today, but we can get back there. We're starting to move in a positive direction. And then I think that is going to help open the doors in terms of American watchmakers being more well-known internationally, in terms of American people that are working in the watchmaking industry in general, maybe moving to Switzerland and doing what Michael Friedman did. It's a difficult thing to do today for sure, but I think we're moving in a positive direction.
Okay. But certainly another American has really made his mark in the watch industry, and that's Ben Clymer, right, with Hodinkee. What was it like at the start? Because I think, like, as you mentioned, you were there when it was like 3 or 4 people. Could you see what it would become? Like, was it evident right from the start? And also, the second question leading on from that is, there were many blogs, watch blogs, coming out at that time. Why was it that it was Hodinkee, in your opinion, that went on to become Hodinkee, and it went on to different levels. Not even just another level, many levels.
Well, yeah, absolutely. I could see that from the start, and I could see it all in Ben. Ben is just he's so driven. He's just extremely focused, and he's always thinking 5 steps ahead of anyone else. So he was really thinking about the digital evolution of the watchmaking industry, while a lot of people were still trying to figure out how to build a website, right? But he was already thinking down the road where we're going to get to a point where you can buy a very expensive watch just with a touch on your phone, right? So very forward thinking, very motivated. And then, so I guess the question is, there were lots of other watch websites out there. What set Hodinkee apart? I think that the journalism has always, the high quality journalism has always been the backbone of Hodinkee. When you're a watch journalist, you get these press releases sent to you all the time. And it's really easy to just select all, copy, paste, upload some images, and there you've got an article. It's just a copy of the press release. But Hodinkee was really focused on professional, high quality journalism from the start. I think maybe that's because Ben went to school for journalism, so he really knew how to do it. And he's just assembled an amazing team where there's so many people that have their own individual strengths that can really build the company. So they're incredibly successful today. It's just New York is an amazing place for watches. You've got journalism in Hodinkee and Watchtime magazine. You've got the auction houses. You've got the boutiques. You've got collectors. You've got the Horological Society. It's a great place to be for watches.
Okay. Yeah. Right. Sorry. I'd like to ask.
What made you pause? What made you pause?
What made me pause?
Yeah.
Well, I was just thinking.
You want to move to New York? Oh.
No. I was just thinking what the next question would be, which was, why did you leave Hodinkee? When did you leave? Because you left, I think, at what would seem still a pretty good time of Hodinkee. Like, what made you, leave?
So I left Hodinkee because I started a new company with a friend, and this was a company called Firehouse Horology, and we were specializing in manufacturing silicon hairsprings for mechanical watches. So this was a new initiative, a new company that really required 100% of my time. Means that I was in a nanofabrication clean room all day, every day, working with silicon wafers. And it wasn't something that I couldn't really multitask while I was doing that. So I left Hodinkee. I left working there full time, but I always have continued to work for them part time. I write articles on occasion, and I focused on Firehouse Horology, making silicon hairsprings. So that was a lot of fun. Learned a lot about nanofabrication.
Like silicon hairsprings, right? Like, what made you think that there was an opportunity to make silicon hairsprings a viable business? Because when I hear you say that, I think you're up against like such strong Swiss powerhouses that I wouldn't have thought that you would have had a chance. But what did you see that convinced you to do it? Especially yours is American made as well.
Yeah, well, the thing that we saw, at least here in New York City, was that there were 3 world-class nanofabrication facilities in the city. So it was very easy to get access to the equipment that we needed to make hairsprings. So making well, I guess I'll step back. If you're going to build out a watchmaking studio, you're going to get all the equipment that you need. You need some benches, some CNC tools. You need metal stock, files, lathes, mills, all this, right? It's manageable, right? With a small investment, you can build out a nice watchmaking studio. But if you are going to get into nanofabrication and you want to etch some silicon wafers, you need lithography tools, you need reactive ion etchers, You need wet benches for cleaning those solutions. It is not at all a small investment. It's not even a medium-sized investment. This is it's only the type of thing that you see at very large tech companies like Apple, Google, Intel, Samsung, or very large universities that have it as part of their teaching program. So we're very lucky that in New York we have a few of these different universities, and they offered their clean room facilities for businesses to use, to rent out, rent the tools. So we saw that as an opportunity. We also saw it as a challenge. We want to manufacture parts for watches again. We want to manufacture them here in the U.S. And we thought, well, let's start with one of the most difficult parts we could possibly make. Right? Let's start with the hairspring, and that's what we did.
And how did that go? How did it go? I know how it went, but I'm sorry.
Yeah.
I'm sorry. But how did
No, it's fine. It's fine. You can see I'm smiling, I'm laughing. I worked in the tech industry for a long time, as we talked about, so I'm totally okay with failure. I'm okay with learning from failure and moving on. That's just something that happens in the tech industry all the time. So we closed up shop in February 2020. We closed the company. It was a good run. I think it was about 5 years of full-time work. What we did is we focused all of our energy on building a great product, but then we couldn't sell that product when we were done, right? So we had a silicon hairspring that was it was working perfectly. We had it validated by a third party so that we could say, yeah, this other person says it works well. Don't take our word for it. We had new patents on it. It was a new technology. They were perfect. They were great. I've still got them in some watches here in my workshop, just kind of as prototypes. But we could not sell these things. So we went all around the U.S. We went to every watchmaker in the U.S. and there was just no interest, because watchmakers in the U.S., at least at that time, for the most part, they were not replacing individual hairsprings in their watches. They would purchase entire movements and put them into a case, design the case around that. So then that left us with the option of going to Switzerland, and we did go to Switzerland. We tried our best to sell those hairsprings to the big Swiss brands, but then it was just an awkward marketing exercise. How do you sell a Swiss watch with an American hairspring in it? It just never worked out. So we made the decision to close it up. But it was a good run. I learned a lot from it.
Did you feel like you were like a bit like walking down the path of George Daniels with his coaxial escapement, and thinking, oh, this is how he felt trying to convince Patek Philippe to use his coaxial escapement?
Did you approach Omega?
He went through many. Yeah. Eventually, he went to Omega. I mean, first of all, did you go to Omega? And then, is that how you felt? Did that ever come across your mind? Like, convincing the Swiss to use something American was incredibly difficult.
Yeah, yes and no. I mean, everywhere we went, we were, I don't know how you'd say, greeted with open arms, very friendly. I've read Daniel's autobiography, and it seems like he was, sometimes he had very frustrating experiences in his meetings trying to get his escapements commercialized. I don't think our meetings were frustrating. It was just kind of like we were coming to a realization that we're not going to be able to sell these. The other issue with silicon hairsprings is that it does not make sense to sell small quantities of them. The way that they're manufactured with nanofabrication, it doesn't make sense to say, oh, okay, let's order just 10 of these hairsprings. I think our minimum order quantity for it to actually be viable was like 10,000 hairsprings. Otherwise, it didn't make sense to actually start the manufacturing because they would just be too expensive to really put into a watch. And that's really where we ran into a stumbling block.
So could you isolate what you would say from your experience of that venture, what the key learning points are from that failure was? like that you could apply to maybe other businesses? I'm just thinking on behalf of maybe the audience that may want to go on a similar venture that isn't like hairsprings, but what were the key learning points from it that you carry forward onto your next project?
Well, my key learning point was that we needed to think about how we would sell our product at the end, and we really did not consider that in the beginning. We just assumed that it would be it would sell itself. We didn't really put any thought into how are we going to sell this, who would our customers be, how would we price it. It was just, we thought, well, the hairspring is the most difficult part to make, so naturally when we're done it should just sell itself, right? But that's not what happened. It's not like magic. It doesn't just happen like that. So you got to put thought into both aspects. You got to think about selling your product, and of course you got to think about making your product. Is it possible to make it? What's your advancement going to be? What's your technical difference going to be? We put all of our eggs in the R&D basket, which was not a wise choice.
Right. I remember when I spoke to you previously as well, you said there's a lot of business side regarding the patents for these things. And yes, but could you shed some light on that? Because we didn't go into detail, but the expression on your face, said a lot.
Yeah, I mean, we spent a lot of money on patents, patent lawyers. So if you ever bored and you want to fall asleep very quickly, just go on to patents.google.com and then start typing in random watchwords. Type in escapements, oscillator, balance wheel, hairspring, and you're going to find just a multitude of patents that have been issued by all the big watch brands, and you'll get to read the very technical language that is in them. So it's something that is really not discussed much, but intellectual property is hugely important for the watchmaking industry, and there are many patents out there. So it's patenting something that is new, that's novel, that is has some advancement to it. It's not an easy thing to do. Even George Daniels, when he patented his coaxial escapement, he cited prior references because there were prior references in the 19th century. So there's, in watchmaking, it's very rare to find something that is totally new that no one has ever thought of before. There's probably someone that patented it before you.
Okay. All right. Moving on, we have to talk about the Horological Society of New York. How did you end up as the executive director?
I guess I kind of just worked my way up the ladder. So I started. I volunteered and joined their board of trustees, and then I was the vice president, and then the president, and then after I was the president, I took on the role of executive director. So I should clarify what those roles mean in a nonprofit organization, at least in the U.S. You have a board of directors; they're all volunteers, and then you have a president of the board who is kind of like who leads the board meetings. But these are all volunteer people; they're not paid, and it's kind of like maybe you'll have a meeting once per quarter, right? So it's not a full-time thing. The director position, which is what I do right now, it's very similar to what you would think of as the CEO of a for-profit company. So it's a day-to-day responsibility type of role. So it is my day job to make sure that the Horological Society continues to run.
Okay, and what purpose does it serve? And how is it actually maintained? We got all these volunteers, but I mean, you have a building, and I think from your photos, it's pretty well kitted out. So how is it maintained, and what purpose does it serve?
Yeah, so the purpose, I can tell you our specific mission that's in our Constitution, and that mission is to advance the art and science of horology. It's a very broad mission. It can mean anything, right? But we do a lot of different activities that kind of fulfill that mission. So those activities, we have our lecture series. We had one this morning. We had a Zoom this morning with Gégé Lecoute. So this is kind of an international day for me. I was on the Zoom call with Switzerland, and now I'm on the Zoom call with you guys. So we have our lectures, our classes, our scholarships, our libraries, a little bit of everything. And then you asked, how do we maintain the society? How do we keep it going? Because we do need to pay the bills, we need to keep the lights on, and we need to pay our scholarships, right? That's a big thing that we do every year. We award scholarships to watchmaking students. And the way that we do that, it's primarily through our members, our individual members. So we have thousands of members all over the world that support us by joining and donating just $100 per year. And for that $100, you get a nice lapel pin that you can wear on your jacket or your shirt. You get some magazine
Still waiting for
benefits.
mine, just letting you know. I'm still waiting for mine. Yeah, I'm still waiting for mine.
It did not arrive?
Yeah, okay. Don't look surprised.
Oh, we got to look into this.
Yeah. So a lapel
we'll
pin?
Make sure, yes, we'll make sure it gets there. You get your lapel pin, you get some magazine subscriptions, some benefits, right? So we have all these members that support us all around the world. And then we also have our corporate sponsors. So you'll see on our website, we have the logos of many big watch brands, and they pay a bigger donation every year to have their logos on our website before our lectures. That's how we do it. That's how we keep the lights on.
Right. And as a custodian of HSNY, that's probably how you see yourself. What are your plans to grow it?
Well, it's growing pretty fast right now. Sometimes we like to joke. It's kind of like
it's because of this podcast. You do know that, don't you?
Yeah, this podcast is giving us so much exposure. Right now, it's growing. I mean, it's like a rocket ship taking off, and we're just trying to control it. We're trying to make sure it stays on a good trajectory. So we're going to continue developing new initiatives and enhancing the ones that we currently have. So an example of that is our scholarships that we award every year. Every year we've increased the number of scholarships that we give out, and next year, actually next month, we're going to be announcing a new scholarship, and we're going to be increasing that amount of scholarship even more. So that's something to look forward to. It's just always continuously focusing on the mission and trying to figure out new ways that we can satisfy it and expand our reach really around the world at this point.
So one thing that I didn't realize until I spoke to you previously was that actually it's open to everyone around in the world. It isn't just, although it's called Horological Society of New York, it isn't just limited to New York or America. But what benefits, let's say, could I get if I was I am abroad?
Yes. Oh, it's a great question. And it's something that we run into a lot, that people think it's just a New York thing or just a USA thing. It's not. It's international. Everyone is welcome. Right now, if you're not in New York, you really get almost everything that someone would get if they were here in New York. There's very few things that you don't get. Trying to think of, because all of our lectures are still on Zoom, right? So we don't have many in-person events yet. We'd like to get there soon when the health situation allows us to do that. But for right now, things are still online. Just this morning, we announced the Hodinkee magazine membership benefit. It used to be just for US members only. As of today, we just announced it's international. So anyone in the world that is an HSNY member gets a complimentary Hodinkee magazine subscription, along with, I think we have 4 or 5 other magazine subscriptions that are available. And you get your lapel pin mailed to you. So we're really, I think that's going to be the theme for 2022, that we're focusing on international, that we're not just New York, we're not just USA. And I can give you a little bit of a sneak peek without naming names, but in January, every year we announce the new trustees. So we usually have 1 or 2 new trustees that join the board as previous trustees reach the end of their term limit. So our 2 new trustees that are joining the board in January, both do not live in the US. So it's nice. Okay. We're starting to really go international.
You could have named me. I didn't mind.
You're spilling the beans, Daniel.
But how does one become a trustee?
So to be a trustee,
I'm just interested because I'm thinking if I wanted to, how do I go around doing that?
That's a good question. So to be a trustee, you need to be nominated by a current trustee. So
okay,
then
is that it?
That's it. Well, you're nominated, and then every year in December we have an annual election, and so the new trustees are
Right.
voted in. And this year we had quite a few nominees, and two lucky people got their own seat on the board, and we'll be announcing them very shortly. But the trustees, what does a trustee do? A trustee is someone that we entrust the organization to. They vote and debate important topics for the board. An example is next month we're going to be announcing a new scholarship. That's something that we proposed and we debated 6 months ago. We were really thinking about it. Who should this new scholarship be named after? Why should we do it? Does it really satisfy our mission? Are we doing it for the right reasons? And if it's all agreed on, if everyone is into it, then it's approved, and then we move ahead with the actual implementation side of things.
Will you ever look to because the problem is that I see is that you've got this thing in New York, right? And you admittedly said that a part of the problem is that people think it's local to New York. Would it be possible to replicate something similar with satellite places around the world? Because I appreciate one of the missions that you're very passionate about, because you're a watchmaker, is getting more people into watches, right? And you said that it does, there's not enough people in this trade, even in America. Well, if we take that bit further and say, most of these watches that are being made are actually being bought by Chinese people, right? Ending up in China. So a lot of those watches that actually do need servicing, repairing, or maintenance are in China. But then there isn't, as far as I know, a body that quite sits as your function to promote that. So I don't know whether that be something, very far down in the future where, yes, it's okay, you're inspiring everything in America, but it's limited to America and not the world. And then, I've got a second question, which is, I might as well ask it now, but it's not actually related, is you have a great library, right, of books, fantastic library. But, I love reading. I'd love to be able to access that, right, without having to go to the library physically. And quite frankly, you delivering me the book, something I don't think is a realistic option for me to return it. Maybe it is, maybe there's a way around that, but I'm just thinking about customs and all this kind of stuff when books go across. I'd really appreciate if that was a service.
Well, you're already telling the future. Right now our scholarships are just in the US, but we have every intention to expand them as much as we possibly can here in the US. And I think that eventually we could and we should expand them internationally. That's going to be down the road. There's a lot of work that needs to be done to get to that point. But I could see that happening. I think that would be a great thing to do. Just from an implementation perspective, it's going to be challenging to award scholarships in different countries just because of the financial implications of that. How do you give a scholarship from one country to another with all these different rules around money transfer, and how is it tax free? It could be difficult, but we can get it done. There's no reason why we can't figure that out. And then you mentioned the library. So yes, we do have a very large library, and I can't say too much about it yet, but just watch this space. We're going to be making an announcement about it very soon, and it's going to be accessible to everyone around the world. And we have a special way of making that happen.
I look forward to that, because watch books are not cheap. And I've been buying a lot this year, and they're just not cheap, and it doesn't make the barrier to entry into this interest very accessible. So
well, you can see we haven't communicated about our library plans just yet, But if you're in New York, or if you ever see any photos, we're starting to have events in our library.
Yes,
Just
I've seen that. Yeah.
when it was, I think it was last week on Friday, we had an event with a Japanese brand, Minase, and they did their first exhibition in the U.S. At the library. We had an exhibition from Parmigiani Fleurier in the library a while back. So we're starting to activate the space, and people are coming through and seeing the space. And very soon, hopefully next year, we're going to be making an announcement about the future plans for the library, what we've been working on.
I won't push you anymore. But that rounds off a really fantastic conversation. I learned a lot about watchmaking that I never had an appreciation, and thank you for shedding light on that, Nicholas.
When I go back to New York, definitely I'm gonna hit you up and visit the H.
You're not going to get her out of the library.
That's fine. Yeah, absolutely. Anyone who's interested, if you're in New York, you want to come by the library. I guess the easiest way right now is we have an exhibition on view. It's an exhibition of horology and art. So lots of different artwork that's on view, and anyone can book an appointment to come and see it.
Also, you guys can find them on YouTube. I've watched a lot of the lectures and guest lectures on YouTube from your YouTube channel. So
no, by then, Nicholas, you'll be able to see the rest of Jacqueline's face instead of just the forehead.
Oh.
But yeah, maybe Jack, you can aren't you supposed to do 3 kind of completion rules at Harvard? And I think the second one, maybe you could do in that library in the HSM.
Yeah, come to New York.
Right. Right. We now move on to the reverso round. So, Nicholas, you've prepared 3 questions, 1 each. Please shoot.
Yes, absolutely. So let's think about three questions. I was going over these this morning. How about Jacqueline? I'll start with you. Who is your favorite historical watchmaker?
Probably Louis Breguet.
Good answer.
I mean, I think he's just I don't know how professional watchmakers view him, and he's one of the top, right? But I think in the collector community, just among the masses, he doesn't get as much attention as some of the more contemporary watchmakers. But I think you can't deny his position and what he has contributed to the community, not even just the community, but just watchmaking in general. So yeah, probably Louis Breguet.
And I think there's something else, is that we recognize Louis Breguet mainly for the tourbillon, because everybody, that's marketed so much. And I think also what Jacqueline says about his positioning in people's minds is very much down to the brand, where the brand positioning is as well.
Yeah, it doesn't do him enough justice.
It doesn't. But then I can't remember which book I was reading, but it was just, he's invented a lot of things, right, that doesn't get the attention as a tourbillon. And unfortunately, the tourbillon now is seen I think amongst collectors, towards the higher end or the more knowledgeable, they don't really see the tourbillon as something that is connoisseur worthy. It's more something to attract the masses via marketing, right? So I think that none of that does him any favors. But I think if you read up about him, it's very impressive.
Yeah,
I can give an example. Have any of you ever dropped your watch and then picked it up and it was still working?
Are you talking about that parachute thing?
Yeah. I mean, he invented the shock absorber for balance wheels. So if you drop your watch and you pick it up and it's still ticking and it's fine, you have Breguet to thank, because he invented the shock absorber, which he called the parachute. Like you were saying.
I remember I dropped my Calatrava. I didn't drop it, actually. My cat knocked it off the table, and I was like, oh no, because I just switched a new crystal on it, and then I picked it up and it stopped working, and then I was like, oh no, because it was an older watch. So then I had to bring it to my local watchmaker, and we were trying to find parts for it on eBay, and I was like, this is just it's a never ending game. We're never gonna find it. It's such an old watch and whatever. And then long and behold, we did find it, and then it was the Breguet Overcoil. So so I mean, I'm assuming that it's named after him because he invented it. Actually, I don't know, but yeah, I remember like it was the Breguet Overcoil, and then we were trying to find the right one because there were several different ones, and then it took, I think I bought 3 different ones, and one of them was
I remember this. Yeah.
yeah, and then because one of them got crushed in the mail because it's so small.
Yeah.
And then bought another one, it was the wrong one, and on the third one it was the right one, and it also didn't get crushed. So then I sent it in, and it was working. So
okay.
Yeah.
Right, second question.
How about for you, Lang Lang? Let's think about what is your favorite watch complication and why?
I want to say
I know this.
okay, but I'm trying to think of like a new one. Okay, so mine's really fascinating. I always say perpetual calendar just because I just think it's so romantic, and it's kind of what got me into watches, just imagining back then when people had no technology and they could produce something like this in, like, I wouldn't call them wooden sheds, but like houses made out of wood. And then for people to sit there and produce something like this.
Dude, the world time.
Okay, yes, but okay, so
that's also romantic.
Yeah, that's romantic, but then it doesn't move me as much because I've just never been someone that like, I don't think I love traveling as much as you. Like, I travel, but I don't love traveling. Like, it isn't like on the top of my list, like to travel around the world and use this, like use the technology, right? So just the perpetual calendar for me is like, it basically like encapsulates everything about like watchmaking being so romantic, and like it doesn't need to have, it's not like I'm going to be alive in 100 years, but just the thought of like the idea behind it just like makes me think like horology is just so romantic and illogical and everything that I want it to be, right? But then the other one that I find like fascinating and I would say useless is jumping deadbeat seconds, actually, because it's just so, for lack of a better word, extra, and you probably don't need it, but it's just like, whoa, okay, they can do it. So yeah.
I love
like
that one. Yeah.
I love the deadbeat.
Yeah, I love deadbeat. Love a deadbeat.
Yeah.
I love how like under the radar it is, discreet. But such high level watchmaking involved in that. That's what I admire about it. Yeah.
It's interesting that it just kind of recently come back in fashion, because you used to see a watch that had discrete seconds like that, and you would think, oh, this is a quartz watch with a battery, so it's cheap, it's not valuable, but it's kind of throwing that notion all away. Yeah,
I think it's because watch lovers are becoming more educated, and watch lovers, they love to demarcate themselves out from other watch lovers as being extra knowledgeable, as I know the next thing that you don't know. Oh, you didn't know that this wasn't quartz, you know? And because it's had that thing with quartz, which is like, I don't know, like the devil in watch, you know, where it almost obliterated the Swiss watch industry. It has that contrast, very strong contrast. So I think it's very powerful.
Yeah.
Right.
Well, Daniel, the third question for you, I want to get into a philosophical question.
I'm great with philosophy.
All right. Has your notion of time changed since COVID?
Yeah, I think so. Because there's something about traveling that gives you an appreciation of time. And that may be because when you're not moving, let's say when you do travel, I should say, you're on the clock a lot of the time, whether it's like business or pleasure. Let's say I go for 2 weeks. You have a very clear, you know, when you get past the first week and you already think, oh, I don't want to go back. Or if you're on a business trip, you're like, I can't wait to go back, right? You have a very clear understanding of how much time you're spending at a place. But when you're not moving, everything becomes more of a blur. And also, when I say not moving, a lot of the meetings we're having are via Zoom, right? So it's not like that where you have to plan your time. I need to get out the house at this time for the traffic, and then plan all the way time. You're allocating time slots really throughout your day. You're still allocating time slots, like we allocated time slot for this call, but they're less, right? And so your appreciation of time is less. The value of time is less. So I think it kind of like shortens everything, although you never can shorten or lengthen time, but it feels like everything is shorter. Because I think, I may be traveling in the next couple of months, and I'm sure when I do, it will feel like I won't have enough time.
Mm-hmm.
But right now I feel I have all the time.
Yeah.
So that's my answer.
Yeah. Okay. All right.
Right. But before we go on to the pump push around, I have to tell the audience, basically every time that we have a guest on, I always vet the questions. And mainly because I don't want to really answer questions that we've answered before in previous podcasts. But one of your questions was like so difficult, I had to take it out. But it would be very interesting to hear your perspective on that. I'd also like your perspective on some of the questions you answered, like who is your favorite watchmaker and why? And then also your favorite complication, because I just want to see that watchmaker, because you're not a collector. You say that you're not a collector, you're a watchmaker. So I'd like to see what your appreciation is of favorite watchmaker, favorite watch complication. But also Nicholas's question was, what's your favorite escapement? And I was like, okay, wow, okay, leave me out of this. Like, I had to Google different types of escapement, and I was like, okay, I don't have enough time to read this. Like, could you explain just that question alone? So I just want to learn, that's all.
Yeah, well, today we take it for granted. We just think about the lever escapement, and that's just the escapement in every watch. But there's hundreds of different escapements that have been invented over history. And they all have their strengths and weaknesses. They're all interesting in their own way. And escapements to me are very important. I study them. I think about them all the time. So I'm always comparing and contrasting escapements. So you're asking me what my favorite escapement is?
Yeah.
My favorite escapement is the Fasolt escapement.
I know what that is.
Yeah. Have you heard of Charles Fasolt?
No. Jack,
have you heard of the?
Do you know?
I have no idea.
Well, have you heard of George Daniels?
Yes. Coaxial.
So you've heard of the coaxial escapement, right?
Yeah.
So the coaxial escapement, I like to say the Daniels coaxial escapement, because there was another coaxial escapement that was invented about 100 years before that. And it was invented by Charles Fasolt in New York in the late 19th century. So it was the first escapement, or one of the first, I think, to have two escape wheels on one central axis. And the idea was to reduce the amount of friction that the escape was generating and make it last longer, be more precise. So Fasolt made a large number of his pocket watches with this escapement, and it's George Daniels, in his patent for his escapement, he cited Charles Fasolt as a prior reference. So he studied Charles Fasolt in order to make his escapement. Now the Daniels coaxial escapement is improved. It has its own differences, but I like the Fasolt escapement because it's the original coaxial escapement, and it was made in America, and specifically made in New York. To me, that was kind of my COVID lockdown project. So I made a new Fasolt escapement and retrofitted it into an existing watch. This is a watch I'm working on now, and I'm building I'm putting a new Fasolt escapement in there now. You probably can't see it. It's blurry on Zoom, but this is an old Hamilton movement that I'm retrofitting with the Fasolt escapement. So yeah, that's my favorite escapement. You also asked who my favorite watchmaker was. Undoubtedly George Daniels. I mean, he's such a huge influence on me. I never met him when he was living, but I have met his protege, Roger Smith, many times. I count Roger as a very good friend, and George Daniels kind of single-handedly saved independent watchmaking, and the Daniels method lives on today with Roger's work on the Isle of Man.
Yeah,
Yes, Lama.
This might be a bit off topic, but for someone that can build movements and understand movements, right? I'm sure you see a lot of watch movements out there that don't actually make any sense, but they're marketed to people like us that read about it and that go, oh, this is going to improve accuracy, and this is why this is here, and this is why this built
Like double
this way.
balance.
Yeah, so that's actually my question. I want to know if there are any brands out there that are marketing something that when you guys see the movement, you're just like, it doesn't even make any sense.
The answer is yes.
Okay, you tell us after the call then.
Yeah, after the call, just let us know.
Yeah, so I've got to give the political answer there. I can't name names, but yeah. Of course, of course. One thing I remember I learned in watchmaking school is the most critical that we ever can be about any watch, any brand. We could say is very interesting. You can't be more critical than that, because you got to be polite. Right?
I always say that. I think you take that from the British.
Yeah, it's very interesting.
I also have a follow-up question to what Lang said, which is now you see, at least to me, you see more emphasis on the movement architecture and the aesthetics of a movement. How important to a watchmaker is the architecture, or how the movement looks like compared to its technical functions?
Not that important at all, and you can prove that by looking at George Daniels' movements. They're rather plain.
Right.
The finishing is plain. They don't have fancy Geneva stripes or complicated engravings on them. So it doesn't matter. You can polish it, make it a mirror finish the whole way. It'll be dazzling. It'll look nice, but it still will function the same. You can take a movement that is beat up, scratched, and you can make it chronometer standard. It really doesn't matter.
I think that's also like Roger's contention as well, because he just wears a Rolex Explorer because he just says the movement. And I remember he was saying, I think it was a Lemania movement 321, where he was just saying when that used to come in, he knew he was having an easy day at the office. Yeah. And to him, he thinks about how he says that watch movement was made by watchmakers rather than more for aesthetic or for the consumer, I guess. Yeah,
absolutely.
And your final question, which was the favorite complication.
Favorite complication, I would say digital watches, jump hour, jump minutes. And I just like those because I like telling someone, oh, look at my digital watch, and it's a watch from the 1800s. Yeah, and they say, oh, that's not digital. There's no electricity. And I say, yeah, look closely at the numbers. It really is digital. So I think digital jump hour watches are pretty cool.
Okay, good stuff. Right, we're going to move on now to the final round, which is the pump push around. Okay, here we go. We have 11 questions here. For someone who has actually met him, is Aldous Hodge as good looking as he is in real life as he is on screen? And that's clearly not my question.
Absolutely. Aldous is he's famous. He's well known for a reason. He's incredibly good looking. He's very handsome. He's huge. He was in this new new movie, and he did this new workout routine, and his arms are just bulging. So he's
right.
Yeah, absolutely.
Can I just say, is bulging arms helpful for being a watchmaker? Does it make a difference? Like, does it get in the way? Do you know what I mean? Like, no, I'm serious.
No,
because you know, as a dentist,
clockmaker.
if you've got big hands, it's not good.
Yeah.
Because you can't get in.
Well, Aldous is a very talented watchmaker, but I assume if you're very strong, it could help for clock making if you need to lift a heavy clock movement.
And case making.
Don't know about watches. Yeah, cases too.
All right, number 2. What is the most difficult task or the most annoying task you find being a watchmaker?
The most difficult would probably be installing a hairspring onto a balance and vibrating it to speed. It's very tedious to do.
Mm.
Right.
especially when the hairspring is silicon, and if you touch it wrong, it'll break.
Right. Number 3, the most important trait to have, or it could be a personality or skill of being a watchmaker.
Definitely patience. You got to be patient. If you drop a screw, you lose a part, you got to be okay with it. Be all right to move on.
Right. And number 4, with you taking time to find passion in your life and then the business that didn't turn out that well, are there any regrets that you've had in life?
No regrets. No, I'm happy with where I'm at.
Okay. Don't worry, there's still
regrets.
time.
Yeah.
Right. Number 5, what do you do in your downtime? And do you have any other hobbies?
In my downtime, lately, I've been working on our house. So my wife and I, we just bought a new house. So I always joke to her that if I ever need a new job, I could be a handyman. I've learned so much about plumbing and electrical and DIY. So on the weekends, I've just been working on the house. It's winter here. It's getting cold, so I've just been fixing the furnace, making sure the furnace is up and running. That's my hobby right now.
I love DIY. I love getting my drill out.
Yeah,
that's true. I just love it. Right.
Can't relate.
It's just something really satisfying doing small tasks and problem solving, because a lot of DIY is basically problem solving.
Mm-hmm.
And seeing something which is broken and then fixing it. It's just something very satisfying about it.
Agreed.
Number 6, it's kind of like, not relevant now, but the question was, with such a considerable beard as yours, because it was more significant than it is now, how long does it take to groom every day? Because I can't even grow a few hairs above my lip.
When I had my beard, I shaved it off.
Significant beard.
Yeah,
it was significant.
It was big. It took a few years to grow that. I shaved it off during COVID because wearing a mask over a beard like that, it was just not good. Was not working out. So I shaved it off. Grooming it, I would just brush it in the morning, and it took 1 minute. That was it. I put some oil in it, some nice smelling oil.
Okay. Next one. The one watchmaker you would love to meet, historically and present. I think you might have answered this.
Yeah.
George Daniels, for sure.
And present?
Present. Watchmaker I'd like to meet that I have not met. This one requires some thought. Okay, maybe you guys can help me remember his name. The watchmaker, the Russian watchmaker. I think he lives in Chaikin. Yeah, his work is amazing. Konstantin Chaikin. Yes, his work is absolutely amazing. I would love to meet him someday.
Did you see his new Minion watch?
Yeah.
It's fun.
My first when I first saw someone post it, it was on someone's story. And I thought he put an emoji over it, or like a GIF over it, because I was like, okay, I know about this brand because he's famous to make like the vampire and the Joker and whatever, the clown. There's no way he made a Minion one. And it was actually a real watch. I was like, wow, that's really cool, the collaboration.
Yeah, very cool.
Yeah.
Right. Next one. The person who has been the most impressionable on your life.
Impressionable. I would say I learned a huge amount from my watchmaking instructor. Paul Francis Madden. So if it wasn't for Paul teaching me the basics of watchmaking, putting me on the path, I wouldn't be here talking with you today.
Okay. The best thing about living in New York, professionally and personally?
Well, from both, it never gets boring. There's always something new to see. There's some new exhibit happening, some new restaurant opening. You can still get lost in a new neighborhood. It never gets boring. It's always alive.
Okay. And the worst thing?
The worst thing are the winters. Yeah, they're very cold and very snowy.
Okay. How long do they last?
But at least in the winter time, you don't smell the smell of burning garbage.
Yeah, that's true. Winters, it's like 2 or 3 months here. The slush gets really annoying. If you ever cross the street, there's always like melted snow that's very dirty, and you have to jump over the slush so that you're not going to submerge your foot.
I used to tell that to friends, right? That I used to see snow. I used to take a picture of snow, and they're like, "Oh, it's so beautiful." But I was like, "You don't live with it." You know,
you guys obviously
it looks
didn't live in
picture.
Canada.
And
What's
beautiful for the
slush?
first day.
What slush? Like you walk out in Canada, Vancouver, it's much better, but you go to places like Toronto or Calgary. Oh my God, it's not even slush. It's just like your shoes get ruined because of all the salt that they pour on the streets.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Right. The last one. We love our food here. You did mention restaurants. What do we have to hit up when we go to New York? What's the place that we have to go to?
Well, I think back to my brother-in-law who was here for Thanksgiving, and when he came to New York, we went to Katz's Delicatessen. So they have the famous pastrami sandwich or corned beef sandwich.
So good.
And it's this huge sandwich. It's amazing. One sandwich is perfectly enough for two people.
Also the matzo ball soup.
Matzo ball soup, yeah. It's Katz's Deli is good. It's everything it's lived up to. It's a famous restaurant. Tourists go there, but it's really good.
It's really good. Yeah.
Right. Well, coming up to Christmas, all that's left to say is Merry Christmas to you, Nicholas, and your family. And
Thank
I swear, I've been saying this after every episode, but we must meet up after things open after COVID.
Absolutely.
I hope I'm not saying that for the majority of the episodes in 2022. Thank you for everyone for listening. I don't know when this is coming out, but if it is before Christmas, season's greeting to everyone. Any final words, Nicholas, from you?
Just thank you all for having me on. Merry Christmas, Happy Hanukkah, Happy Kwanzaa, and best wishes for the new year to all of you.
Okay.
Thank you.
Stay safe, everybody. Bye.
All right.
Bye-bye.
Thanks. Goodbye.
As always, thank you for listening to the Waiting List podcast.
We hope you've enjoyed it as much as we have. And if you have any questions,
Comments.
Or feedback.
feel free to reach out to us at the Waiting List Podcast on Instagram or via our private accounts.
We'll see you on the next one.
Bye.
Bye.